This is All Things Caregiving from Breathing Spaces.
Hi, my name is Cyndi Mariner, founder of Breathing Spaces. Welcome to another episode of All Things Caregiving. I'm here today with my friend and host, Cyndi Gum. Welcome.
Hi.
Today, we're going to turn the table a little bit, and I'm going to let Cyndi ask questions of me about a recent experience that I have been through, where I turned the tables and I became the patient, not the caregiver. This role gave me the opportunity to look at life and caregiving and patient roles a lot differently than I had before. I went through Mohs surgery, and this was a skin cancer on my head, actually. And what came after the surgery, during the surgery, after the surgery, really took me off my stride. It wasn't something that I had anticipated. I didn't realize what would happen during the procedure, after the procedure, even now, weeks later after what happened. So I'm going to turn this over to Cyndi, and I'll let you go ahead and take the interview from here.
Yeah, thanks. Cyndi and we spend a lot of time talking about caregiving and what it means to show up for others with presence and a compassionate heart.
Mhm.
And recently, Cyndi found herself in a very different position, needing to care for herself after this surgery. And that shift can be more complex than we expect. So today we're going to explore what that experience has been like. We're going to explore together, not from the outside, but from the inside out, what it's like to move through an experience like this, to experience resistance and the vulnerability and exposure, and to discover what the issues are related to how we receive care, how we soften into receiving care if we've been this caregiver, always giving to others. So, Cyndi, maybe you could start off wherever you'd like to begin here in this little journey we've got together here. What was the first time you noticed? What was the first thing you noticed as you went into this experience that made you realize, wow, this is a little different than what I expected?
Hmm. Cyndi, I think it was actually being in the room having the procedure done.
Mhm.
I've had a Mohs surgery before, and wasn't the most pleasant experience in my entire life, but it wasn't that big of a deal, and the healing was fairly quickly. This was unexpected. Being in the chair, having the surgeon, slicing you open, you're numb, all that good stuff. But I could feel her as she was stitching me together. I could feel that. And I literally felt my whole body and energy just wanting to scream and get up out of that chair. Now, I'm not, I've gone through pain on different levels. I think many of us have. I don't know what it was about that particular time, what the vulnerability was. I
Mhm.
trusted the doctor, but I was literally coming out of my chair. And I knew I had to do something, so I went into box breathing, so that I could pull myself back energetically into the chair. And I think after that, Cyndi, it was more of a, wait a minute, what just happened? What just happened? You go out in the waiting room, you have to wait until they run the lab results, you come back in. So there's time in between before that stitching actually happened. And
Mhm.
you don't quite understand what is coming next. They tell you things once the surgery is done. They hand you a little piece of paper and say, here, this is what you need to do when you go home. And what came after that was just completely unexpected for me.
Wow. So it sounds like you first noticed this is a different situation than I expected and almost
Yeah.
went into a dysregulation just with fear.
Panic.
Something was not right.
Mhm.
Something was not good. And that was when you were still kind of under, right?
Right. And I was telling myself, you're with a very competent doctor, son, this is fine. Don't get
Yeah.
so anxious. But something inside of me just took over and started squirreling down the little path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, so you immediately were aware of this when you got home. This was not as usual, right?
Right.
So
Right.
you're aware of that. So then what happened once you got home? Why don't you just share a little bit of your experience of going into, the moment when you realized, I'm fine. No, I'm really not.
Ah,
So
right.
yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, you come home, your head's numb. It's very numb.
right.
But then you can start. The doctor has said, go ahead and take Tylenol. Be a little proactive for the pain, and I did. And then I'm trying my best to not pay attention to anything. Get involved, watch a movie, something, just take me out of it. And the pain started, and then it got worse, and it got worse. Without going a blow by blow. I ended up getting a hold of the doctor the next day and saying, this pain is, I'm going up, I'm past level 5, I'm going up to 7 plus. And eventually my pain got up to a level 9. I mean, I had never experienced pain to that degree. And they had me take a little bit more. No, actually, when I called, they put me on a narcotic and said, this is a short dose. I didn't want to take it. I don't like taking things like that. But when you're under that kind of pain, you're going to do whatever you're going to do. So I took that, and the pain was still up there, even with the medication. And I think at that moment, I come home, I've got this wound that's still here. I still have my wound. Um, I wasn't, I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know what to expect, I guess.
Mhm.
And as they're telling me things before I left, oh, make sure you do this and do that. And I said, is everything written down on a piece of paper? Because I'm not going to remember this.
Mhm.
Oh, we'll send that to you, which they did,
Right.
but there's still gaps in that little sheet. There's still gaps in there saying, if and the pain level gets to that point, here's what you do. We don't anticipate it, but do this. A little bit more explanation. And once I got to that pain level point, it was the weekend was coming. I knew that, I'm on a short dose of narcotics. I'm not going into a weekend back on Tylenol again when I've been on that level of pain.
Mhm.
I talked to my doctor ultimately. She gave me a different regimen to go on. Neither one of us wanted me to be on that narcotic any longer. And the pain started subsiding.
Mhm.
I'm going into something that I wasn't aware of ahead of time. I'm washing my head twice a day, changing the bandage, making sure what does it look like. Fortunately, I have this man in my life that I just love dearly, Bob, that's, we live together, that was taking care of me. Making sure that I had food, was washing my wound for me because I didn't want to touch it. And I, at some point, Cyndi, I just started breaking down emotionally after the pain level being so high started to come down. Um, I kept saying, Cyndi, it's going to be okay. I know mindfulness things. I was trying to do all those little practices,
Right.
but I think, Cyndi, what happened was not having a better understanding of what was coming put me in a greater fear mode. And I realized partway through your role has shifted. You're normally the person who's giving care to folks, not receiving it, not like this. So I was trying my best to emotionally kind of balance myself out a little bit. Once that pain stopped,
Mhm.
the following week, I was so exhausted. I didn't do anything. I slept, I watched movies. That's all I did. I was absolutely off the ceiling, down on the ground, exhausted. And I think after the exhaustion set in, that I got really emotional. I got really upset. What is this? Why did this happen to me? And it's not really, I don't do that. I don't, it was, this whole experience was like this other human being out there and watching this other human being go through all of this.
Sounds a little surreal.
Yes.
Or, being in kind of a suspended state that you didn't expect to be in and was totally unfamiliar. And it makes me think so many caregivers go through this because everything to me when I was a caregiver was so uncertain. So it's really hard to often even know what to expect. That's part of it. But as the caregiver, I don't think the one experiencing the pain, when I'm hearing your story, Cyndi, I'm thinking, wow, it sounds to me as though what brought you really to your knees was that pain level.
Mm-hmm.
And you're the only one experiencing physically the pain level. But what happens to one happens to the other. So here's Bob having to witness this as well.
Right.
Here's Cyndi, who's always fine, right? Always taking care of things. And then all of a sudden, wow, this is a whole different experience for Bob as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it really brings both of you into this kind of surreal, suspended state and leaves you very open and exposed. You're used to holding it together. So, at some point you have to say, I'm not holding this together so good. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, and being able to do that, Cyndi. I think it's, Bob didn't say to me, honey, just fall apart if you need to. I knew that I needed to just let myself fall apart. You don't need to be Cyndi Mariner breathing spaces. You just need to be a human being right now and let this thing process. Because if I try to push through this, that it's going to backfire somehow. I don't know how, but you need to allow yourself to be in that vulnerable state.
Right. It sounds like once you let go and entered your vulnerability, realized that, wow, yes, this is different. Wow, yes, this is a heck of a lot of pain I'm in. Wow, everything I've landed in Oz. Everything is different. Nothing is familiar. Yeah. Yeah. And then it sounds like there was a softening or an acceptance of, I don't know, or an allowing of being in this vulnerable state. Is that right? At some point, you allow that to happen.
And I think, I don't think I know, Cyndi, you and I jumped on a Zoom. It was a check-in. You wanted to see how I was doing. And I remember like it was yesterday, that Zoom that we had gotten on. And we were discussing what had happened. And I just remember tears starting to roll down my eyes because I was looking at myself, right? As I was talking, and your compassion, which is always so beautiful. And it just allowed me to really just break down and feel it truly.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first, like the ice pick, that day.
Wow.
Because even, Bob's was lovely, but there was just something about that conversation that really allowed me to just kind of peel down and just be who I realized what I had just been through. And, in hindsight, look, this wasn't heart surgery. This wasn't brain surgery. This wasn't something huge.
But the
But
pain was, I'm
the
hearing,
pain was,
the pain was significant, and
right.
that's no matter what.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
And,
that's across the board.
when you're in that position of caring for someone, being
Yeah.
able to have that conversation of how are you really doing?
Well, they have to stay strong. Remember, they're the caregiver. So all of a
Oh,
sudden, here's this person that has been so strong, being
yep.
dependent. And this is the shift that takes place. And it could be an accident, it could be a sudden heart attack, but this happens overnight.
Yep.
And, it may not get better. So for caregivers, I think it's really important to validate this whole process and know they're not alone, which is what I know you care about most of all, is helping people know you're not in this alone. And I think that's a really important message that I'm hearing from your experience, and the process that you went through, and the the initial resistance we all have. No, everything's fine until all of a sudden you realize everything isn't fine. It's a journey, isn't it?
Right.
Really.
Right.
So, what a journey you've had.
Yeah.
I had a question here. Oh, yeah, I'm curious to know what is different for you now that you understand all of this? Or is there anything you might do differently as a caregiver because of this?
Mm. I I think there's a different level of conversation that I would have with someone that I'm caring for. Um, I think that in being in a caregiver position, I wonder how often people actually say, I can't imagine what this is like for you. And I think we as caregivers may say that, but I wonder how much we're really feeling it as we say it. And I feel like that, I've got a huge level of compassion, but I think there's a different inner knowing of I can only imagine how isolating this must feel to you and
Mm,
how powerless you might feel in this. And there are things that I'm going to be able to do to help support you.
mhm,
But I really want to open this channel up so that we can talk through what's really happening.
mhm,
The last thing that I want you to do is charge through this and feel like you don't want to burden me. Understand that by not talking, you are burdening me. If
mhm.
something's going on, if there's a feeling happening, fear, anger, whatever it may be, let's talk about it. Because I think that's what naturally will help this process.
Oh, it's a real validation for whatever that experience is. So for the caregiver, what I'm hearing is to validate. It's not just to get the needs met physically, externally,
Mhm.
but try to help the one you're caring for try to validate their experience. And as you said, it's hard to know what their experience is until you get there.
Right. Yeah. And you
Such
can't,
a
it's not fair to the other person to say, oh, I can only imagine what you're going through. Don't,
yes.
I don't say that.
That's a really good point because it's so easy to do that.
Yeah.
We have an instinct to minimize. We just do ourselves for ourselves when we're in
Yeah.
that situation, but for those that we're caring for. So, wow.
Yeah. And it's, the last thing that I want to bring up here, Cyndi, is the don't be afraid to talk to the doctors. Don't be afraid to say, I don't understand. And I reached back out to the doctor afterwards and wrote this message to her and said, "Look, you need to be whatever you're saying to a patient on the way out the door. Make sure that's mirroring exactly that little piece of paper that's going home. Don't say something even remotely out of context out of there. Not that she was doing anything wrong. I don't mean it like that. This is a wonderful human being,
Yeah.
but there are little snippets that need to be in that piece of paper and they're not. So communication needs to be really clear. And if you, as a caregiver, are in the room with the doctor, ask every single question you possibly can. And if something comes up, don't be afraid to go back to the doctor and say, this isn't making sense. If you
Hmm.
have to do it 55 times, do it.
Hmm.
Don't be afraid to be an advocate, whether it's for yourself as a patient or if you're the caregiver, please don't be afraid to ask those questions.
Thank you. And I think we should do a podcast on being an advocate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I'm hearing that's a big part of this story as well. So, wow,
Yeah,
uh, what an experience. Well, I'm glad you're on the upside of it. It's
absolutely.
great to see you back, and
Yeah.
I look forward to our next podcast together.
I am too. We've got a nice list coming up of people that we're
You,
interviewing, so I'm looking forward to it.
me
Thank you
too.
all absolutely for being part of these podcasts with us. We love to hear from you. Many of you have reached out to us, so please feel free to do that. And Cyndi, thank you for being here with us too.
Okay, thank you so much, Cyndi. See
All
you
right.
soon. Bye bye.
We'll see you next time.
This has been All Things Caregiving from Breathing Spaces.